So right now I have done the unthinkable and I've basically let my garden go unattended for like 5 months. It's just been really busy and I haven't been able to keep up, and the season slowed down, so I just kind of dropped it. But I'm going to show you guys what happens when you leave your garden unattended. This happens. It's pretty bad. It's very embarrassing. Yeah. Oh, I even have a pumpkin I didn't know about. So this is not ideal. I'm just now getting around to cutting down my Christmas tree, and so all of that is going to go in. And so we're going to start. I'm going to go through and pull out the weeds and then refresh the bed a little bit, and then we'll go through and start laying down the pine and fir mulch. In this case, we'll be using the Christmas tree and garland scraps I have. So I'm currently cutting down my tree, and basically we're going to mulch, and I'm a little late on that, but this will allow us to kind of keep the weeds down a little bit. They won't have much breathing room. It'll keep the soil moist, and then that mulch will also die and add that nutrients into the soil that I was talking about. But if you ever are not going to cover a spot of your soil and you don't want to plant any flowers or use it for active gardening, I recommend using clover. It's a beautiful border plant. It's a beautiful lawn plant. I mean, look at that. It's just stunning. It's fluffy. It grows thick. It covers a lot. Yeah, it's good. Okay, so this is what I'm working with. Doesn't look pretty. I've left some scraps. I'm going to go ahead and toss in that pumpkin over there just to kind of see what happens. I like to test around and see what happens when I leave certain plants in, and usually they come back pretty happy the next year. That being said, if I'm going to leave that pumpkin, I'm going to break it up a little bit. It could totally mold underneath these branches, but for me it's worth a try. But I'm not going to say I necessarily recommend it. This is what beginner gardening is. It's just testing things out, seeing what works for you and your climate and your area. Like I said, usually things go fine for me when I leave them in the ground and kind of throw in old scraps, but it is a gamble. That means next year, whatever comes out of this garden is going to be remnants from last year. So who knows what that's going to look like. Hello. But I wanted to go ahead and start mulching just so I could show you guys before it gets dark out here what I'm going to do. This is all scraps from Garland. It either didn't get used or is trash now, and I don't want to waste all these tree scraps, so that's part of the inspiration here behind repurposing, remulching. Now, if you didn't want to repurpose the tree scraps as mulch, you could always compost it. I know exactly where all my Garland and tree came from, so I know that I didn't have any pesticides or chemicals on it, but if that's something you're worried about, you might want to double check your sources. But my stuff was all hand harvested and local, and I know exactly what is on it and what is not. So we're good on that. You shouldn't have to worry too much about pests. Usually pests don't care for pine and fir, but just be aware of issues. All right, now you might have seen there are some oak branches. I'm not going to use those as mulch right now. I'm going to move those to the side and maybe do another project with them, and I'll let you guys know what I do. Otherwise, all this is gonna come with me. Now, if you want, you can cut this into smaller pieces. That might help make it easier to manipulate, easier to break down. I'm not gonna do that. If you guys know anything about me, it's that I'm a fan of the laziest gardening possible, which is probably why I haven't touched my garden in months. But yeah, you can break it down, cut it into smaller pieces. It's just gonna make it a little easier to work with. But if you're like me, you're good to just kind of layer it carefully as one big piece. Now we're gonna layer these on, and it really is that easy. You're gonna want to make sure that it's covering most of the ground, but want it to be thicker than like 2 or 3 inches. So this is fine. Obviously it's pressing up a little bit because that's the shape of the tree, but if you make it too thick, it's not gonna breathe out, but if you make it too thin, it's not gonna hold that moisture. So It's definitely happy medium. I find it with this kind of fir to kind of lay a piece down and then right at the bottom 1/3 start another piece and then go from there. I do have some smaller filler pieces, and those can kind of go into the gaps that aren't quite covered. Now you might have noticed I kind of made like a little cozy circle around that tomato plant. We just want to keep that from getting too cold, but we also want to be able to make sure that he can breathe and that he's getting enough moisture, and also that the soil is evaporating enough moisture so it doesn't drown the plant. All right, guys, that is looking really good. It's pretty much all covered, but not suffocated. You can still see some dirt, but it's got a couple inches of warmth and also nutrients. So yeah, and obviously, you know, I say hopefully it breaks down into the box, but whatever doesn't, you can always pull in the spring and put it into a different pile or recycle it or reuse it however you want. So hopefully this helps someone out. Gardening in the winter is sometimes hard because you're not motivated and you're not seeing all the cute things grow up and you're tired, but I actually think it's my favorite time because you can prep and plan. And if you don't do things for your garden that help now, you'll be fine, but you're gonna see the difference when you do things for your garden now, such as protect it from weeds and freezing over. I mean, so many seeds that have replanted now have a better chance of coming back in the spring on their own without me having to do a lot of work, just because I kept the soil warm for them during these really cold days. You know, for us, January, February, and March are honestly the coldest and stormiest, so this was perfect timing. And if you haven't done your garden yet and mulched it and prepped it, now is the time. It's kind of now or never. Use your tree scraps, use your garland scraps. It's not difficult. You don't have to be an expert. I'm not an expert. Just stick it on there. Look at that sunset. Here, I'll show you guys. My landlord has the best view over there, and I'm so jealous all the time. And have a good night, you guys.